Welcome to the Awaken on Purpose podcast, where each week you'll hear inspirational stories of heart-centered leaders who have awakened to their higher purpose and taken that leap of faith to follow their heart and make an impact in the world. Get ready to be enlightened, empowered, and transformed with your host, Jennifer Spohr.
I am really overjoyed and just really excited to welcome to the show today, Sharon Gill. She is a faith-based business and leadership coach. In 2015, she launched her online coaching and empowerment business in earnest, reaching thousands of women on a weekly basis and changing lives for the better. Sharon is also a spiritual mentor to an equal number of women through her Gorgeous Women movement. She is the mother of 2 amazing children and 1 equally amazing grand munchkin. I am so happy to have you.
And I am thrilled to be here, Jennifer. We have so much in common, and I'm just so glad to be here.
Oh, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. So you are such an accomplished, purpose-driven, just an amazing leader. I mean, I could go on all day, honestly, about how amazing I think you are, but tell us what inspired you to actually do the work that you're doing today?
You know, from as far back as I can remember, actually from high school, I was always that person that would look for other women, kids, young women who seemed a little bit, outside of a clique, who seemed like they could use some encouragement, that they could use a friend. And I was one of the quote unquote popular girls. So I was always in some type of a clique, but I always looked for those people who felt like they were just on the outside. And I always made an effort to befriend them. And I think that's where my love and my passion for helping women started, really right in high school. And I think when it comes to being that faith-based, person, I remember several years ago, it might have been about 16 years ago, I was in the middle of really making a lot of money in my career. My husband and I, we had a law firm together and we were doing very, very well. But I felt such an emptiness, such a sense of disquiet that there was more to life than what I was doing. And I remember just asking God just to show me what is his purpose for my life. And it was an odd time because I had just, gotten back from Dartmouth College. They had an executive MBA program that I was part of it was like a week-long program. And I came back at first, thinking I was going to make a lot more money for my firm. And in the middle of that, I just felt empty. And just through a couple of weeks of praying and fasting and just seeking God, it came into my spirit, and it really came through a dream, but that's a long story. I decided to actually pack up and leave my company, leave my business, and to start a work in the community, to start to work with people who were disempowered, marginalized, people who just kind of like felt hopeless. I felt like it was my call to go out there and show them that there was a better way, that God had a plan for their lives, and it wasn't just to be downtrodden and broken. And I never quite understood why I was called to do that, because I felt at the time, just in my flesh, like, wait a second, I'm a corporate person. Why would I be called to work with, homeless, marginalized immigrants? Why would God call me to do that? And it wasn't until later on, maybe a few years later, that I realized and remembered that even as a kid, I was always looking for that person who was downtrodden or marginalized or left out in the cold or left out of the circle, out of the clique, and trying to bring that person in, trying to give them hope and encouragement. And so I did that charity for, like I said, 16 years, from 2003 to the end of last year. And during that time, I learned so much. I learned so much that women, whether they're poor, whether they're middle class or whether they're rich, they all have the same problems. They have self-esteem problems. They have dreams and hopes. They love their kids. But we all had the same problems, and that we all needed that shoulder, that mentor, that coach, that encourager to really help us walk through life. And as I was wrapping up that work, because that work had come to a close in that community, I felt like I wanted to dedicate the second half of my life, being a woman in my mid-50s, to really focusing on helping women step up into their full potential and become all that God, created them to be. And that's just something I'm just very passionate about, in addition to being passionate about leadership, of course. But I'm very passionate about just seeing women step into their full potential and, and do the business that they want to do, have the relationship that they want to have. But mostly for me, my passion extends to women who want to, grow their business, start their business, have the financial independence, lead purposeful lives, leave a legacy for their kids. That's just where I feel particularly drawn. And I think that's just something that was implanted in me from a high school kid, 14, 15 years old back in my country.
I really feel like what you said is key when you were talking about how, in looking back on things, even when you were a young child, you were just always feeling drawn to help others who were down, to help others realize their full potential. And it made me think of myself when I was a little girl. I wanted to be a teacher. And I was always the person that people would kind of go to for advice.
Yeah.
And then I ended up actually going the retail route and established a really successful career there. And a lot of my ability to help other people, I did incorporate that into my job, but then I ended up starting a business. And so I kind of came full circle, sharing the details of this and along with your story to just illustrate that often the greater work that we're meant to do, it's already within us. It's part of what brings us joy. And it also can include our own life experience.
That is such a good point, Jennifer, and, I'm just going to use a little bit of the scriptures here, because something that you said just brought to mind two scriptures from the Bible, right? And one scripture was taken from Ephesians 2:10, I think it is. And it says that God has prepared work in advance, right, for us to do. So before we even came on the scene, God had prepared specific works for us to do. And this is one of the reasons why I just love to help women discover their purpose and their passion. And the second thing you said was, that it's already there. And the first part of that scripture in Ephesians, I think it's chapter 1, it says that we are already equipped with everything that we need to be successful. We have it all. It's already, we come pre-wired with everything that we need. And sometimes, and some people might say, but why am I not getting ahead in life? Well, sometimes, and Jennifer, I know you do this kind of coaching. It's just our mindset. It's these negative scripts. It's the fears that dulls it down. And this is why it's so important for women like me and you to help other women bring those things up, because God already put it inside of you. And we're just so afraid to take that step. And like I said, I couldn't understand why God would call me to work with, broken people. And then I remember, but I was always working with broken kids. I would look at a young girl and I would see how her hair was done. And I would look at her and I would say, but if she just did her hair this other way, it would make such a difference. I'm 14 years old. She was selling my books, but that's what I would see people how they were meant to be, not how they currently are. And that's just a gift that God has given me, I think. And it came to play later on in my charity. I'll share the story with you briefly, Jennifer. I remember when I began to work at the charity first, about I maybe say maybe 8 months in, I began to have buyer's remorse. I felt like, wait a second, I really leave my job, my corporate job, to work with these homeless people? You know, I mean, they had all these issues, and I began to have buyer's remorse. And, you know, I said, God, maybe you didn't call me. Maybe it was a mistake. And then I stepped back for a little bit, and I said to God, look, I want to do this, but I have to be true to myself. I just don't feel like I'm wired for this. But if you would give me a new pair of eyes that I can see people the way you see them, then I think I can do this. And I literally stepped back for about a month or so until I felt that God had actually changed me. And I remember when I went back to my charity, because I'd really stepped away physically as well for about a month, I remember seeing this homeless man, Jennifer. And this was a man who, you know, he always came for bread and pastry, you know, clothing. And I remember he was always a bit smelly, you know, and I was muscled up. I was prepared to deal with it. I was embracing myself. But this particular day, as I saw this man, I didn't see any of that. I didn't smell anything. And I knew he was still, you know, unkept. But I remember walking towards this man with my hand held out to shake his hand. And he was looking at me like I was crazy. But he held out his hands as well, and we connected. I even remember the cut he had on his hand. I remember the cut as vivid as it was yesterday. It was 15 years ago. And I said to the gentleman, sir, what is your story? And how did you end up in a place like this? And I remember the man just broke. He just broke and began to cry and began to tell me his story, how he had a job, he had a family, he had kids, then he lost his job. And then he began to drink a little bit. And then the drinking became harder. Then he lost his family. Then he began to do drugs. And then he ended up on the street. And for the first time in my life, I saw him as a man and not a homeless man. There's a big difference. Seeing a person as a man, the way how God sees them, and as a homeless person, how you see them. And so I know that, you know, God can really rewire you for the task that you have to do. You just have to allow yourself, you know, to be the person that God intended for you to be.
What you say about allowing is so important, because as humans, we have been created to have free will. And so sometimes the solution to experiencing the shift that we desire lies simply in asking.
That's right. That is right. And asking with intent, and asking and listening. Sometimes we ask, but we ask so quickly, we don't even stop to listen. But ask with intention and listen as well. You know, get quiet sometimes. It's such a good exercise to have that quiet space so you can actually listen for, you know, for what God, you know, is saying to you. Get quiet, ask. Every year for 21 days, every year at the beginning of the year, I fast. I do what they call a Daniel fast. I eat no meat. I drink no sweets. I don't have any alcohol. Sometimes I even fast my coffee. I just eat beans and vegetables. And during that time, I have intentional asks. I ask God, what does he want me to do for this year? Or I may actually present a question or a particular request that I'm seeking answers for. And I remain in a state of intentional listening for those 21 days. And I gotta tell you, every single year I walk away with something.
That's awesome. And even making, you know, that space for ourselves daily is so important. I always say that prayer is the asking and meditation is the receiving the answer.
Yes.
There's just so much going on, and especially with all the technology nowadays, we really have to be intentional in creating that quiet time for ourselves.
I agree. I attended an event that Chris and Sherry had yesterday. One of the things that I took away from that was even social media time, setting a timer, because we can allow, you know, social media, technology to really eat up our time, even eat up our spiritual and quiet times. Because how many of us are so tempted to get on social media and not creating that space where we can meditate, where we can listen? You know, it's just so important to put these boundaries in so that we are using our time purposefully, you know?
Absolutely. And we can't get back time.
No, we can't. We cannot.
Sharon, what advice do you have for others who are in that place in their life? They're at that crossroads where they're feeling called to do more. What advice could you give them to be able to take action to move forward?
Well, the best advice I can tell anyone, if you're feeling called to do more, you're going to have to do it afraid. Okay? Because here's the thing. If you're called to do more, that means it's something big. It's bigger than where you are right now. And that's going to come with a certain level of fear. It could be fear of success. It could be fear of failure. But you're going to have to make that first step. Nothing is going to happen until you make that first step. And so what if you fail? Okay, you can start again. But you have to do it afraid. And I would also say, surround yourself with good counsel. Now, remember that when you have a vision, it's your vision. Others may not see it. Many times we want others to join or agree, but they may not see it. God gave you a unique vision for your unique life. So others may not see the vision, but if you're married, for example, you know, you may want to have your partner support. Okay. It's hard to do it alone. It's hard to do it without support. So you may want to have that conversation. If you have a pastor, you may want to talk to your pastor. I know that's what I did. When I felt called to leave my corporate job, which was paying me good money, to do a charity with zero money, with no salary, I have to put the seed money in. That was a huge, huge step. It was going to affect my household finances, my kids. So I had to get my husband's support on that. I also went and I spoke to a minister. I spoke to my pastor because I wanted to make sure that, was I hearing from God for this really big step? So I got his support and his prayers. And he actually, you know, was able to do, you know, help facilitate the transition for me. And when you do it afraid and when you do it by faith, God really shows up big. When I stepped away from my law firm, we had about 25 employees at the time. And I was making good money. But when I stepped out in faith, Jennifer, our law firm within 1 month was acquired by the largest minority-owned law firm in the country. They took the salary that I was giving up, they placed that salary on my husband's salary and doubled it. Every employee who worked for us got an extra week's vacation, better benefits, 401ks, things that we weren't offering at the time. And so we were merged into a company that had 300 people. My husband became one of the major owners, and I was able to go do a charity for free because it was already, God took care of it, it was covered. How did I make that step? Well, thousands of people would not have been impacted by the work that we did. Jobs, food, clothing, counseling. Had I not made that first step? So there's someone listening on this podcast that God has been calling them, but they're so afraid. If you believe that God has called you for something greater, you're going to have to trust and rely on your faith and make the step, because there's a huge blessing out there waiting for you.
I love that. And I love that you shared that part of your story, because it's so important to illustrate for people that things really do fall into place when you take that leap of faith, and you're often not going to be able to see the path ahead. And that fear doesn't go away. We feel fear because we're human. What is important is for us to just learn how to move through it. And that's why, mindset and faith are really, really key to being able to move forward on a new path. And like you said, for anyone out there who is feeling called, it's okay to answer the call. It's safe for you to shine, God has got your back.
I agree. If you're feeling a call, that feeling was placed there by that higher power. I mean, I'm convinced of that. And you by yourself didn't think it up, but it was placed there by a higher power. And if it was placed there by a higher power, then that higher power, God, he's going to provide the way and the means. You may not see it, because that's why it's called faith. You have to trust and believe, take the step, and then watch God do the rest.
Absolutely. Sharon, how can someone find you if they want to connect with you or learn more about you?
My web link is sharongill.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn at Sharon Gill International, or at Purpose Centered Leadership as my business page. Sharon,
thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, I could talk to you for days.
Absolutely.
I just adore you, and we seem to have so much in common. I just love it.
Thank you, Jennifer. I mean, I really appreciate the work that you do for women as well. And just continue shining your light out there. And, the world needs it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Awake and On Purpose podcast. Please visit us and subscribe to the podcast at awakeandonpurpose.com so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how you can connect with your higher purpose and take that leap of faith to make your impact in the world, visit us at jenniferspor.com. And while you're there, be sure to join our email list for exclusive offers and a weekly dose of inspiration.